And let me pin myself. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be back live with the sessions. I'm happy to run this session every Thursday at 7 p.m. It's focused on development in Salesforce. We're starting with Apex. Hopefully in the future, we can do LWC and other areas of development in Apex in Salesforce world. This session, the focus will be in introducing object-oriented and explaining the object-oriented programming in Apex and going through the details and why it's important and how to implement it. We'll see how far we can go. Whatever we didn't cover this session, we'll resume it next time. So object-oriented is a very important topic. It helps us to organize the code very well, and it helped the code to be more maintainable and scalable as well. And it's a very common topic that you'll hear developers talking about because it's not a Salesforce topic. It's a paradigm that is used for development. So you may have heard about it or implemented in different languages. And if not, it's very important to make sure that we understand it very well, because even if you change the language in the future, go to C# or a different programming language, the concepts itself will be the same. Just the implementation will be different depending on the language we are using. So it's very important to make sure you understand it very well. So if you have any questions anytime, feel free to stop me and ask it. To make sure everyone is following and we are all on the same page. Also, I just want to make sure that you are aware of the YouTube videos we are recording. You can access it on my channel, Code with Sally. I keep the URL for you in the chat so you can refer to the channel and subscribe, and you can watch the videos in the future. And you can reach me on LinkedIn or on Slack for the military or Slack for Code with Sally, whichever way you prefer between the sessions as well. And again, any questions anytime, stop me. I don't want anyone to feel like left behind or confused because we'll keep building on the topic every session. So for this topic, I started to prepare the slides and I went over the slide multiple times and kept changing how I want to go and explain it to make it easier. So I thought about, let's get like a bigger picture first and step back for a minute and see what problems we can face in our code that we can benefit of using object-oriented, and what's the benefit of object-oriented when we apply it. So early days, people used to write code sequentially, like this example, and I will take it and put it in the developer console and go through it. And sequentially means like line by line. I want to do something, I do it, and then I do the next step, as if I'm writing a recipe or like a long essay. So it wasn't organized. It was all in one file, line by line, sequential. Let's take this code and talk about the problems we can face about that. And some references will be talking about that as a procedural programming, as type of code or paradigm of coding. It's not important to know the details for it. I want to show you the problem we are facing with. So I would recommend that you have either a trailhead that you are using for development or a developer org. I will open here from the gear, the developer console, and I will put the code so I can explain to you what's the problem or what's the issue. So let's assume we have a couple of students, and I want to keep an idea what type of cars that they are driving. And I want to keep that in variables in a way. And then I want to go through each car and print the details for it. So before object-oriented, like if I wanted to keep the details of the student car, the first car, I would create, like, for example, student 1 car make, and I will enter its Honda, then the model and the year. By now, you should be familiar with the syntax. We are creating string variables. So we have the data type as a string, then the name and the value, and it's single quotes here because it's a string, semicolon to end the statement. So we have 2 strings and 1 integer for the year. Then we repeated this, but S2 in this case for the second student. The third student, we know their VIN number. So we enter it in a string. So if I want to add a 4th car, I would have to create again, yeah, but here someone, I will create here student number 4, and I can create here as 4 VIN number. I know the VIN number for this car, and let's say it's here. It can be an invalid value, but for now, just for the example. So I can create that. And then let's say I want to print the values or the details of each car. I could create a debug statement for the first student. I could concatenate the variables S1 plus the S2 plus the S1 model, then the year. And the same for car 2, the third car, because I have a VIN, I will enter a VIN, and then I will have the 4th student car details as well. So I will do that. So the problem with what we have here now, that let's say in the future, I want to add a color. I have to come here and add string, S1 color, and I have yellow. And you'll have to go one by one each line and change the structure of the car. And the same when I want to print here the details, like I will have to go here and say color. I want to print with the car details, the color, and I have to go get the string and append it. So it may seem like not too complicated and not too repetitive, but in fact, I have to repeat the structure of the car that I want to keep getting the information, the format for it, for each car over and over again. And here, for example, I'm not keeping the make or model, and nothing is like making them into one unit. So those are different variables. I could, by mistake, print here for the second car, instead of writing the model for the first car, I wrote the second and I swapped them. Nothing like keeping them as a single unit, because at the end, they are all variables for me. And it doesn't matter, nothing tells me that you cannot print the model for the second car along the details of the first car, because nothing is relating them into one entity. So that's mainly the issue that we faced in the past, that it's hard to maintain the code, especially with complex code, because again, this is just a sample to create cars, and it's simple, like, okay, yeah, I have 3 lines for each car. But again, I could print things differently wrong. I could include the model of this second car with the first student, and I couldn't mix them up. So there is no integrity in my data. It's human error. And also there is a lot of duplicate code. Here, the debug statement and how I format the car details is repeated. So if I have 10 cars and I say, like, I want to add the color as well, or I want to show, instead of spaces between the make and model, I want semicolon, I have to go and change it in each debug statement. So that's the main problem that the object-oriented paradigm came to solve, because we don't want to keep things unrelated for the items that are related together, like the car details, they are related together. I shouldn't be confusing the first car with the second. And I want all the cars to have the same properties or the same details to describe them. And I want to avoid having repetitive code. like if, for example, another example we could face, if you have, let's say, integer number 1, it's the number, I will create 2 numbers, and then here number 2, it's 4 or 6. If number 1 is greater than number 2, I will say system, debug, first number is bigger, and else I will print, for example, system.debug. And I put here second number is bigger. So here I have 2 integers and I'm comparing between them. It's simple, but let's say I want to compare 2 other numbers. So that means here I have to repeat the code again. I will have here number 3 and number 4. Here this is like that, and I will change the if statement and so on. So the problem is, if I want to compare 10 pairs of numbers together, that means in old days, I would repeat the same chunk of code 10 times. So it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make the code easy to read or easy to maintain, because in the future, maybe someone come and say like the check should be greater than or equal. So, and change the message. So if you have this repeated 10 times, that means you have to repeat and fix the change 10 times. If you have it in object-oriented, and we'll see how that will happen, you would be doing the change only once, and it will apply for all. So that's the main problem that we are trying to solve. Any questions so far? Okay. I think we are good. Let me go to the next slide then. So when we start, before going into the definition or big words for object-oriented, I wanted to introduce the main 2 building blocks that we'll be using and working with to work with object-oriented. The first one, you'll keep hearing that we talk about class. The class is the blueprint that we work with. Blueprint means it's a template. So like what we had here, I want, with the example of the cars, for example, I have the car have make, model, and year and VIN number, so I can create a template. I will get the code for you, but we'll get the template can have these details. So as I said, for example, when we were seeing the example, the problem was I can print things wrong, can print the make for the first vehicle along with the model of the second. So I don't want to do that. I want to have a template that tells me each class where it's coming from will have a certain format or shape or properties or attributes to define it and what it can do. So for example, in the building houses, the builder usually they have a blueprint, a drawing that define, for example, that they would have a 1-story house, or if they have a townhouses, they would have minimum a kitchen or a dining room and how many rooms or what's the space of the first floor. So it's a blueprint. It's not the actual house that they will build. And based on that, there is objects. That's the second part of the object-oriented. The object is an instance of the class. So the class is the blueprint or the template. It's empty. It has just the structure or description of how the class is or how the object should look like the blueprint of the house. It just explains how the house would include or how roughly it would look like. But the object is the instance of the class that will actually has the details. So the builder will use the blueprint to build different houses. At the end, they are all following the same blueprint. They are one floor house, they have specific size or square foot, but then this one has a window, this has two, the structure of the rooms inside may be different, the organization, the size of the kitchen island, stuff like that. So that what make the difference. The object is where you will have the definitions or like the specification of each object. So that's the second part of the object-oriented. So the first is the class, and we refer to it as a blueprint, and it's the structure or the template of how your organization or entities will look like. And the object is the instance. It's implementation for the blueprint, but just give it the specific that you will have. The classes, when you will start thinking, it can be, for example, the houses, like the class for the house, and the object is the actual implementation of the house. Another example as well is, for example, the car, because we saw the first example when we had the old days, how they can enter the details of the car line by line. We can have a class for the car. It's the template that will have the specific attributes of the car, and then the object will be the implementation of this class. Like, is it a Honda? Is it a Toyota? Is it a 7-seat car? It's what's the different brand, different colors, different specification of each car that will come in the object. The class is just the skeleton or the template that each car will follow, but each car can be a different brand, different make, different year. So that's the main idea of the object-oriented, and those are the main building blocks of object-oriented. If you will start thinking, what's the benefit of that? We'll see it now in terms of like an example of coding, how we do it, and how that will solve like a lot of issues or like a lot of repetitive code. Also, you'll think about the games that anyone play. You'll find in the code for the computer, they can have a class for the character. And we say that this character is wearing a t-shirt and a short. This character is wearing a dress. So it can have the characteristics. So it keeps all the characteristics of one entity together, and the objects is the instance and the implementation for it. So those are the two main building blocks, and it's very important to know the difference between them and how to use it and how to refer to them. I will ask you also a question. Does anyone remember us talking about a class before in the previous sessions? Do you remember us talking about classes before? Anyone? Okay, let me show you. If you go for the integer Apex methods, if you remember, all the data types, primitive, or even if I go here to the set Apex methods, when we cover the collections, those are classes. And we saw before that we go to the set class or the integer class to refer to the methods. Or when we talked about the sets, we talked about something called constructors we'll cover today, but we saw as well the methods that we can call to add an element or to remove or to contain or to do any check we want to do. So it's important to understand the classes because you will find that we will be always using it. And Salesforce has their own classes that they provided for us and that we are currently using in our implementation, or we already covered when we spoke about the primitive data types or collections. And again, the benefit of it when we spoke about, for example, using the primitive data types or the sets or the collection methods, we said Salesforce provided those methods for us so we can use it and we don't do the same logic again. Do we know in the background how they did the implementation, we don't know. It's within the class, we don't see it. We just call the method and we use it. So that's something just keep in the back of your head, like when we are talking about it. But this, we already used the class before without like thinking about object-oriented. Okay, so any questions? Steve, you have a question?
No, I was going to answer your question earlier, but I was on mute.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so based on that, like in terms of just the definition, we object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm. It's a way for organizing your code based on the concept of objects. It's called object-oriented, so it's based on the objects. The objects are instances of the classes, and as we said, the classes are the blueprint. Like the classes are just templates that the object implement or use to define how the object will behave or what attributes they have. And we said like we can have attributes and we can have methods. Attributes like something that describe, like if we have a class of car, we can have the attributes that define the cars, like the make, year, model, or the VIN number. Methods are the behaviors, like a car can start the engine, can stop the engine, and another class, if we have a class for student, the attributes can be the name of the student, the age of the student. The methods can be, for example, get me the student marks, get me the full name of the student. So it's what we can do with this object or this class. Let's go through the example here that we have tried before for the old days and how we had the cars defined. Now, let's assume we have 3 cars like that. I like to begin first by showing a diagram, like what we did before with the flow charts in the while loops and the conditional statements and for each and do while. I like to show it visually first, and then we do it in terms of code. So we can draw a diagram. We call it class diagram to represent the blueprint we have, which is the class, something like that. So we will call it a car. Regardless, we don't know if it's Honda or inside. It's the car. It's blueprint. It's not implemented yet. And we will have here, we want to keep the make. So we'll have a string. We can have the model. So it can be a string. There is a spelling mistake here. And then we can have the year, which is an integer. Then we can have also a VIN, because the car usually has a VIN. And the color, I want to say it's orange or blue or yellow. And I want to have something, an indicator in my car template that tells me if the engine is running or not. So I can have an attribute as Boolean. Then here, I say like, I want to print the details of the car. So that's one of the methods we can have. I can start the car or stop the car. That's 2 other methods we can have. Here, that's called the attributes of the car class. Those are the methods of the car class. But then I can have S1 car, S2 car, and S3 car. Those are all objects, because here, if you can see here, I'm just saying that the make is a string, but I'm not giving a value for the make. But for the objects, when you define the objects, it will have the same structure. All the attributes that we have in the car as a blueprint will exist for all the cars, as you can see. But then I can define the values for each object. For the first car, I can say it's a Honda with model CRV, year 2000. The engine is not running and it's orange. So I'm describing this car using the attributes I have in the blueprint and that's my first object. The second object is the description of the second car. So I have a Honda inside, 2000, the engine is not running, and the color is blue. Then I can create the third object that will implement, it's an instance of this blueprint, the car class, and it has all the make, model, year empty because I just know the VIN. And the engine is not running and it's yellow. I should have this yellow, but it depends on the color I want. So let's try to do this in code now and see how it's working. Any questions first before jumping into the code on the concept of blueprint versus object? I just want to make sure if everyone is clear about it. No questions in the chat. Another question, is it clear? Like, anyone feel it's confusing or they are not following? I need to repeat something for you. Okay. I think we are good. Okay, let's start then creating the class together. We have two ways to go with that. Either if you have your developer console, you can create here from file, new Apex class, and give it name car and then save. Or if you have your Visual Studio Code, you can have it connected to your org and we can use it, start using it here. So I will be working, I will be using both. So you can try to do it on either that or this, or have the way to access it. So if I go to Visual Studio Code, there was a module how to install it and how to connect it to your org. So if anyone has an issue, you can let me know at the end of the session and I can help you as much as I can. But the steps should be easy, that when you install it, you will do create project SFDX. You will create a project and that will open, it will ask you to choose the type. So it can be standard, and then you enter a name for it and you choose the folder where you want to save. Then you will come here, this one be connected. You will authorize an org. By clicking authorize, you choose whichever, if it's a sandbox or production or a custom URL, and give it a name. It will open an interface for you in the web in your Chrome, for example, to enter the username and password, and it will be authorized. So let me know at the end if you have issues with that. We can work on it together, but let's start with the creating the class first. So to create a class, I go to the folder for classes here, and I do right click and I choose create Apex class, and I will give it a name. So here I would not give a name like Honda car because it's not a specific car, it's a generic. So I will enter car. It's a generic name that other cars will use it to be initiated from and create an instance from. So I will create a car here. And that will create me a constructor. For now, I will remove it. And later on, we'll talk more about the constructor and the benefit for it. Let's save here. And I will do deploy this source to org. That will create the class in Salesforce. So if I open resource here and search for a car, you'll see it here. Again, if you don't have the Visual Studio installed or ready to use, you can come here from File, New Apex class, and you can say car2 and create. That will create to the car2 here. So you can use either this or that. Let's continue here for a bit. So if anyone not having the Visual Studio Code, they don't feel like they are left out. And next time, just make sure you have it installed and ready to be used. So we can all use it if we want to stick to Visual Studio Code, but we can still do it here. So the first thing is, now I created just the template, an empty template. I called it car. I want to start creating my properties or my attributes for the car. Can someone tell me how I can create here an attribute for the make? I have to make it public, and we'll talk about the access modifiers, but for now, everything will be public. I want it to be type string and name the variable for myself as a make. Any suggestion what to write here? Okay. Right, Stephen? So I can here create, say it's a string and type make. So that means I have one property for the car and its type is a make. Okay. Let's see now if I go to execute anonymous and I want to create an instance, car instance one. What I can do here, I can do, if you remember, we had in the past, let me put it for you here. We had in the past, in the old days sample code, we had each string written alone here as a variable, and it's not related. Now I want to create an instance from the car itself. So I would do car, which is the car name. If you see here, when we create a string, that's the data type, which is the string class, and then we give it a name. The same way we'll do it here. We have a car, which is our type, the class car instead of the class string, and then I will have here S1 car. I give it a name. Instead of having S1 car make, I just S1 car because it's a class with different properties. They are all bind together or categorized together, collected in one entity. So if you remember, when we used to work with sets and maps and lists, we said we cannot stop like that. And we used to, for example, do set of string, set names, and we said we have to do a new instance because otherwise it will be null. So it's the same idea here. If I do system.debug now, and I try to say here, student one car, and I try to print S1 car, it will come as null. So let's execute it here. It will be null. So the same as if when we used to do that, when we did S1 set of names and we stopped, and then we printed the set of names. You remember I was telling you that we cannot just define the data type and the name and that's it. We have to initialize it to be able to use it and to see values. So the set was null. The car now is null as well because we didn't initialize it as an empty set or as an empty car. So to do that with the set, we used to do dot new set string. So it's new and the data type. Here it's the same. I do equal new and it's data type or the class is car. So I do it like that. So it's the same idea. Instead of using the sets, we are using the new type we defined, which is the template or the blueprint we created, which is the car, and we initialize it as an empty car. Now, if I execute here and I do debug, I will find that it's a car and the make is null because there is no value for the make yet. So that's how you can create an instance To create an instance of the car, we use the same way we did for other data types. Class, which is car in that case, variable name, and here it follows the same path of the collections, equal, and then we do new, and it's new from which type or which class, which is the car, and bracket and bracket. So that's the first attribute that we added. We added the make. Can someone give me the syntax I can do to add the model as well? Or if you want to type it in the chat. Anyone? Steve, do you want to give it a try?
We can give the same way, public string model.
Yes, public, string, and model. So that defined the second attribute. That's great. For year, it's an integer. So what can I do here? Public, and instead of string,
Integer.
use integer, yes, year. So here I added a third attribute, which is year. Now I want to add VIN, color, and is engine running. VIN is a string, so it will be, yes, correct. And color, it's a string as well. So correct. Sorry. And is engine running is Boolean. I want to keep in it true or false. So Boolean is car running. Okay. Let me just pause for a minute. Classes, we usually started with, as best practice, with capital letter. So you'll always find when we define a class that it starts with a capital letter. Variables, we said before, started with a small letter. So VIN, color is car running, all small letters. When we refer to the string, Apex won't throw an error if I type string with a small letter. But again, now we know that the string is a class, as we always were saying. So now I put the class with a capital letter. So let's save it. And that give me here that we have a class with these attributes. Let's go to the execute anonymous again. Now I have created my car. Now it's time, if I print it, let's see here again, you will print it. It will tell you, initially it was saying that we have only make. Now it tells me you have color, comma is car running, make, model, VIN, year, all are none, but it tells you the structure. So now we created one of the objects here, but we didn't set the values inside. We said that the blueprint is the one that defines what the object will look like. And that's what we can see here, that when we created an instance, which is an object from the class, which is the blueprint, the object is showing the details that we defined in the class. We didn't say anything yet in terms of the object to tell the computer or the code that the car has a make or year model. We didn't do that, but it knows that because it's an instance of the blueprint, the template, the car class, which is a template or blueprint for me. And because we defined that with make, model, year, model, VIN, color, and is car running, that's why when we did the instance, automatically the instance contained these details. But now we want to give these values, these attributes values. So what we can do is that when we do S1 car dot, we can access the attributes because they are public. So we do S1 car dot make, and we say it's a Honda, and S1 car dot model, and it's CRV. And then S1 car dot, the third is year. So we have here 2000. I don't have to go with the same order. So I can have here, is car running? S1 car dot is car running? It's false. And the color is orange. Okay. So now I defined the make, model, year. The VIN, I don't have a VIN, so I will leave it. I don't need to fill it. Then I have the color and is car running. Let's print it here before initial, like before student car 1, before setting the values. And here, this is after. Okay, here, if you remember, what we got was that it's a car and it had like that. Let's take it here. Student phone car, and we had this text. Let's make it bigger. And that's because we created the instance, and the instance got me the details from the blueprint, but the blueprint doesn't give me values. This one here, like that, sorry. So it gave me the instance and give me the instance from the blueprint. So it gets me the structure. So it got me color, is car running, make, model, but the blueprint doesn't have values. So the blueprint is everything is null, and that's why that's what we got. Can someone tell me, because we always try to do our mental debugging before starting here, what we'll have, like for the car color, will we still have a null? Anyone? Okay, yes, correct. So we'll have orange, and that's because we came here, we made the make Honda. So now here the make will be Honda. And then the model is CRV. So it will become CRV instead of null. Then will remain null because we didn't enter a value for it. The year will become 2000. And is car running will become false. And the color is orange. That's what I expect based on line by line. I checked make, so I changed the make. Model, year, is car running, color. So let's print it and see. And that's what we have here, what we expected. That we have the color is orange now, is running, became false. Honda, model is CRV, the VIN is null because we didn't define it or we didn't enter a value, and the year is 2000. So what we did here actually created for me the second object, the first object that I wanted to have. So again, to match it to what we have in the screen and what we are saying, the car is the blueprint. So that's the class that we defined here. It has nothing. It just the structure, define the structure. Like, can I say here S1 car and say dot speed equal 23.9? If I run this code, will it work or will I get any error? Right, Steve, I will get an error. Let's try it. It will tell me in line 17, variable does not exist, speed. It will tell me here that speed does not exist. And that's because my blueprint or my class doesn't have a speed variable. What can I do to be able to run this line? Where can I create a variable to allow me to have the speed? Okay, yes, Stephen, you're right. I have to add this variable in my blueprint. So I have to go to my class, the car, the blueprint, and say it's public double speed, and then save. It's saved now. Let's try it again. And let's move this here so you can see it. Execute. Now you will see that I have speed here added before the setting the values for the attributes. It's the null. And the line that I added the speed in when in the object that set the value for the speed to 23.9. So you notice that you are not able to add anything to the object that doesn't exist in the blueprint. That's the main thing that you need to know. The class is the blueprint. You cannot have extra on the object without having it in the class. The class needs to have it because the object is an instance of the class. So it cannot have things that the class doesn't have. You can, for example, like we have here in the VIN, we didn't set the value for the VIN, but it's still in the class and in your blueprint, but you didn't set a value for it, but it's still there. But you cannot add speed without having the value for it. Okay, so I want to now create another variable or another object that is an instance of the car presenting the second car here. Can someone type the whole code in the chat and give it to me, and I would take a copy and paste? Or if someone feels comfortable sharing out loud, you can do that. And while some can try to do the second car and some can try the third car. I want the second and the third car objects. Steven, maybe you try the third car, and Steve, you try the second. Sagar, can you try the second? Jade, if you want to try the third. Trisha, second. Daryl, third. D, second. Shikan, third. Larry Lee, second. Whoever wants to try, you can try. Okay, we have the second object here. Let's try this code and see it. I will remove the debug statement so it's clear. Here, okay. I see a problem with this code if I try to run it. I have s2.make, that's correct, s2.model, here is running color speed. But I still see an issue. Can someone tell me what's the issue with that, or what would I get as an error here?
We need to create an instance for that. Yeah. There you
Yeah.
go, Steve.
Yes. So Stephen was very excited to define the attributes, but first you need to define the object. Like I could not go and use the set and add names to it or strings to it without defining the set first and initialize it. So you have to declare and initialize the variable. In that case, the variable is your car2. So that's here, declare and initialize an empty car. So that should be always your first step, that you need to do the initialization. Yes, you were speeding. So that's the first thing you need to do, always to do declaration of your variable and initialization. Like you cannot have a string, student name, student name, and put a value here. You have to declare it. Declare it means you have to have the type as well first. So for anyone who doesn't remember, we said that usually it's the data type when we declare a variable, data type, and then variable name, then default value. Here, we have to do an empty instance, so that's why we have to do a new car. Steve, right? Correct. So that's the second car here. Anyone from the team of third car is ready to show it to me? And while we are waiting for someone to provide the code for the third car, just to explain, we did the declaration and initialize an empty car. We give it a name that it's student2 car. Then we started to define the attributes of each, the values for the attributes. I know the make and the model and the year and the color. So make, model, year, color, and we know it's not running yet, so we define it as a false, and we put the speed, that's an extra element we put here, attribute, so we set it to 100. So that's here, we declared and initialized an empty card, then we set the attributes that we know. Anyone is ready with the third card? I don't remember who I assigned the third car for, but feel free if the team car 3 is not ready, that if anyone wants to give it. If not, I will start typing myself. Okay. Steven? Jade, yes. Okay, let's take Jade's code here and put it. So that's the third car. So she started with an declaration and initializing with an empty. We just need a semicolon here. So we know that the line ended. If we didn't, yes, I saw you missed the single quotes. Yes, Jade, I added for you here with the copy. Change the single quote to that. If I run this as well, I will get an error. It will tell me line 26, unexpected token S3 car. So that's because we don't have a semicolon here. I need to have a semicolon here. And yes, it's yellow. I had an issue myself in the slides here. This should be yellow and not blue. So yes, I changed it, Stephen, to match the picture now. But yes, I have here declaration and initialization of an empty class, of an empty instance of the class called S3 car. Again, data type, variable name, and then we initialize it to an empty using the empty constructor. And we'll talk about the constructor very shortly, maybe next time. And then we'll start setting the VIN, then the color, then is running equal false. Let's print the two cars here. Student2 car. And here, let's change the variable. And this one, S3 car. And Steve, you don't need to set the model to null or the year to null or the make. Just ignore it. And you'll see them now. They will be null by default because they are part of, they already exist. They are part of the prototype that we did an instance from, an object from. So you will see here in the third student car, we have the make, model, speed, year as null already. So you don't need to set them as a null. They are already there in the value because we didn't do anything in a constructor to set them to empty string, for example. So they are null, but they are there. So you don't need to set them again. We set it on, we are using, for example, here to set only the VIN that we know the value for based on the image we have here. So that's how you can create a car blueprint, how we can add attributes to it, and how we can create instances, the objects from, and how we can set the attributes of the instances. So I will stop here today because it's 8 already. Time is flying. Next time we'll talk about the methods and the constructor and how we can use them. And I will ask anyone, if you have questions, feel free to ask it now. I will stop the recording if there is no questions, and I will stay online if anyone feel more comfortable discussing the questions offline without the recording as well. But next time we'll pick it up from here. We'll go through the methods and constructors. It's very important to understand how we can use them and the difference. And then we'll start talking about the principles of the key principles of object-oriented. Some of them will go into details and some of them will keep it for the next series, the intermediate. So you can, you don't feel overwhelmed to have everything in the beginner series. But I hope it's a bit clear for you, the problem we are trying to solve quickly. Again, we'll see it more clear when we start talking about the constructor, how we can avoid like repetitive code. And when we do the method, it will be more clear. But at least today we saw that we can combine related attributes together in a structure. So we created a blueprint of a class. So we cannot have here someone saying S1 car dot is running. It's not there, or speed. They have to stick to the blueprint and the structure we defined in our blueprint, the class, and use it. Next time, we'll see how we can add the methods and constructors and use it. And that will make it more and more clear how object-oriented is powerful and how it avoids repetitive code and it makes it easier to maintain. I will stop the recording. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. If you have questions before, sorry, I stopped the sharing. If you have questions before next session, please ping me anytime on Slack or LinkedIn, and I will answer the questions for you. And thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next time.